Let me just make sure it's live. Testing 1 2 3. Okay, cool. We're live. I'm assuming we're live on Periscope and Dlive as well. You can catch this show on all three platforms. Subscribe to my Bitchute account as well, where you can catch these videos, the podcast. We have a podcasting channel. Lord have mercy on us all in Jesus Christ's name. It's October the 16th, I believe. 15th. Yeah, I think it's the 15th, 2020. And what's going on in New York right now is extremely important. It's getting some media coverage. There's a video from a rabbi. All right, his name is Rabbi Handler. And what he says about New York, Governor Cuomo, and Mayor de Blasio is absolutely shocking. I actually caught this on InfoWars. There's a new host. I think her name is Deanna Lorraine. And she has a YouTube channel that I subscribed to a long time ago. Super pro-Trump, super MAGA. But this is where I caught that story. And we're going to talk about that. I also want to talk about disinformation agents and how to spot propaganda on YouTube and on the internet. There's a lot of people right now in the Q community online, or some various offshoot of the Q community, that are attacking, people basically that are calling out Trump. All right. One of the channels they're attacking is Roy Potter from the Potter Expositor. And by the way, a lot has been sort of most recently exposed about him. The guy's a little bit of a nut, but I do watch his channel, and I think some of the things he says about Trump are probably fairly accurate. But he's getting accused of being a disinformation agent by a QAnon community online, or various offshoots, okay? And so you guys know I like to talk about disinformation agents on YouTube and just on the internet in general. And like yesterday, I was talking about Baked Alaska and how I have suspicions that it's possible he would be some sort of disinformation agent. So it's important to talk about that kind of stuff because it's definitely real, right? Some people say somebody like Roy Potterson, who's like really against Trump, calling out Trump every single day, would be working for the CIA, for instance. It's not that it's not possible, but the point is a lot of people are. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about whether or not I think Trump is involved in propaganda himself. In fact, let's just get it out there right now. Pretty much anyone that's in the media, to one extent or another, is pushing propaganda, right? It could be religious propaganda for their own, cause. It could be political propaganda on both the right and the left. This isn't propaganda because this is just entertainment, right? There's nothing really political about a commentary show like mine, but there are a lot of extremely biased outlets or platforms or commentators, and we could just say all of this is propaganda, right? Maybe I've been guilty of propaganda a couple of times in the past, but I'd like to think that I'm pretty fair over here with everything we're talking about. So I'm going to try to be more conscious of this story in New York with the Rabbi Handler, who's basically pleading to Trump and William Barr right now to help that community, and I suppose help the greater, New York situation. I could be kind of biased about this story because I do have, a certain opinion about the lockdowns, the situation in New York, and so, we should be fair to this rabbi because this is definitely an important story, but at the same time, it seems like a lot of the entire country has been shut down, and it hasn't really been as big of an issue as it is when a community in New York comes out and basically accuses the governor of, I think his exact quote is soft Holocaust. All right. These are very strong words. I'm not going to play the video, but I will show you guys if I didn't open it. Hold on one second. Or no, I do. I have it right here. Let me close out of this. All right. So this is the video right here. right? This is Rabbi Handler. And I'm not going to play the video, but you guys can watch this. All right. I suggest everybody check it out. It's from a couple of weeks ago. It's from October 6th. But he basically accuses the governor and the mayor, Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo, accuses them of starting a soft Holocaust, right? Because he calls it the slicing the bologna tactic or strategy, where they're taking rights from this Hasidic Jew community in New York slowly, right? But they've done this, they've done this globally, really, but they've done this in America, in New York in general. But this guy is pleading, this rabbi is pleading with Trump and pleading with Barr. And I hope it captures some attention. I really do. I have a feeling this will probably get Trump's attention a little bit better than we've seen in the past, right? Trump is obviously loved by this community, right? They're wearing his hat. They're out in the streets parading, and they've tried to shut down these protests as well. All right. I don't know exactly to what extent, but there has been some resistance with Mayor de Blasio using New York's police to try to shut down their protests. But the point is they're making a very strong accusation, actually a couple of accusations. The first being that this is sort of a soft Holocaust that they're dealing with now, right? They even compared this to early, early situations in Germany, sort of pre-World War II. They compared it to that, or this particular rabbi did. But I think this is going to get Trump's attention a lot better than, let's say, a Christian church in Louisiana being shut down permanently. This, I think, will capture the media's attention, but it also captured Trump and William Barr's attention a little bit more. Because this group they really do support Trump, right? And there's a lot of Americans that support Trump as well. It's one thing, when you want to support the president, but to sort of, to be under the delusion that he is like some sort of God, or that he wouldn't do any wrong to the American people, I think that's really naive. So he claims, this rabbi Handler also claims de Blasio. This is another reason he's pleading to Trump. He's claiming that de Blasio is deliberately killing old people using the shutdowns. Not only old people, but I think they were talking about how de Blasio's COVID response or COVID policy is killing old people and homeless people. So these are very, very strong accusations. Now, when people try to, talk like this, right? When people's opinions are this extreme outside of the, I'm not saying that I think they're extreme, but extreme outside of the establishment's narrative, they often get compared to crazy people. They get called conspiracy theorists, right? There's this weaponized terminology, conspiracy theorists, extremists, white supremacists. All right. When these kind of ideas are talked about, or when these kind of accusations are made, I haven't seen that kind of negative response when it comes to Rabbi Handler from the mainstream media, from the ADL, right? From all of these organizations. Really haven't seen that big of a response, but the guy is a rabbi, right? So that, I think, is going to be a huge influence in how the Hasidic Jews community's plight in New York, the amount of attention that it gets. And I do hope it does get attention. And that's something else that I think people need to be open-minded about, because yes, you could criticize Rabbi Handler, and I guess you could make a note of the fact that, well, he's basically saying that, the Hasidic Jew community is the only one that's been affected by these lockdowns, right? He's claiming that the Jews are the only ones that are being persecuted by these lockdowns, right? By not being allowed to go to synagogue and not allowing them to open up their shops and their schools, because, they have a whole entire separate world, pretty much a little enclave outside of the, mainstream life and culture in New York. But America, all right, across, from coast to coast, has been persecuted in the same ways, right? Christian churches shut down or extorted and threatened by the state. I mean, we've seen this so many times. And so it would be good, right, in support of Trump and Barr taking a look at this situation and seeing what they can do. Maybe a lawsuit, right? Maybe something to stop some of these orders. But doing that in the pursuit of helping New York as a whole, not just one community. All right. And I think that is, that a lot of people sort of expect that outcome, right? Or expect the story to sort of get the attention it's getting only in serving one community or one group of people in New York. But I mean, there are people that are, starving, people that are have had their livelihoods ripped from them. All right. Lots of people have died, and you can think what you want about that, but people in nursing homes are dying. So New York is in a lot of trouble. And if this rabbi can get Trump's attention about that, that's fantastic. That's great. Right? We need to pray for that, seriously, because New York has been under some of the most intense stress just throughout this whole pandemic, probably since 9/11, 2008, right? Those were both probably very stressful times for New York, but New York is having an even more stressful time than that, right? We're talking about another thing the rabbi brings up, and I'll show you the video one more time, guys. This is Rabbi Handler. The New York rabbi begs President Trump to help the Jewish community. He also talks about how people have died, but how also it's not just from COVID that they're dying. He talks about the mass rioting, the looting, right? He called out all of these, crazy protests and looters. And, I have heard some sources on Twitter basically say that the Hasidic Jew community was really protesting very aggressively, and that there were fights and there were rocks being thrown at people. That could be misinformation, right? That could be information to try to harm the Hasidic Jews' protests and their effort. But he did call out the rioting and the looting and just the lawlessness in New York. New York is in a state of anarchy, to quote Rabbi Handler. So I guess for that video, I wish there would have been more of a message of, New York needs help, right? New York as a whole needs help. And I think through the state and through these lockdowns and these public health officials, by them attacking and targeting the Jewish community and trying to shut them down, it's inevitably going to bring light onto the whole situation where it's not just one community. It's Christians, it's store owners and shopkeepers and people that want to work, right? It's pretty much every industry has been affected by this. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and all the rest of them get richer and richer and richer, and the banks make more and more money. Mortgage forbearance is coming up, and that's definitely going to affect the stock market. It's going to affect everything, right? When people start getting kicked out of their homes, 2021, right? Maybe early 2021, maybe it's later, right? If we get a stimulus or something that extends these mortgage forbearances, but eventually it's going to be up. Imagine that situation with New York, for instance. Imagine New York, and then all of a sudden people are getting evicted from their houses and apartments. I mean, this is a very, very serious situation. The state, de Blasio, Cuomo. I don't blame Rabbi Handler or criticize him for comparing, World War II to what's going on in New York, but it's not just one community. It's the entire city that is under this sort of lawless, totalitarian, authoritarian, state of anarchy and leftist extremism. I think he brought that up as well, just about how these very left-wing governments are trying to target this Hasidic Jew community. So hopefully this does reach Trump and Barr, and hopefully more light can be shed on the fact that New York and just the United States and globally, we are under a tyrannical takeover. This is an event that I personally, from personal experience, would compare to 9/11, right? What's going on in our country is 9/11 on such a grand scale, right? Not just in the numbers of dead bodies, but on the deception, the propaganda that we're going to talk about here in a minute. The media, right? The media wars. Back in 2000, September 11th, 2001, sorry, you didn't have the alternative media and the questioning of the narrative as it wasn't as prevalent as it is today, because everybody has YouTube channels and they can, come online and question basically bullshit coming out from the mainstream media. But the propaganda that we're seeing, the CNN, the clock, the ticker, the countdown, the COVID countdown. I mean, I call this a cult, right? The people that are out there willingly submitting to this agenda, willingly wearing masks in the most ridiculous of places, right? Willingly just going along with the narrative and not questioning any of the numbers or not questioning, what exactly is going on here. And that goes for Trump as well, right? Trump's little 3-day COVID stint. I call these people the COVIDians, right? It's a cult. It's a cult. It's like a cult of biblical proportions, right? That's what they are. They're the COVIDians. It's a mindset. It's an ideology, and yes, it's leftism. It's also communism. A lot of the socialists, but it's also really good people that are very deceived right now, that are completely under the spell of the mainstream media. And the mainstream media has been weaving, their sorcery for decades. So it's really hard to break out of that. It's really hard to realize that, hey, maybe the media doesn't actually have my interest at heart. Maybe the government doesn't actually have my best interest in mind. Maybe the sort of global structures, the global government structures don't have my well-being, right, in mind. It's very hard to come to that conclusion for a lot of people. Just a couple other headlines before we talk about, how I think you can spot propaganda and what it really means and where it is and how to see it. Before we talk about that, just a couple other things. There's a new propaganda piece. I think it's by ABC. I'm pretty sure it's ABC. And it's called Homegrown Hate. And they're basically bringing back Charlottesville, right? They're bringing back that footage. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday with Baked Alaska, because he's kind of alt-right grifter. But they're bringing the Charlottesville stuff back. You're going to see all of this, right? All of this propaganda about white extremism and white nationalism and white terrorism and all this kind of stuff. They're bringing all of this up right now because they're trying to target Trump with it, right? They're trying to tie Trump to all these like little incidences, and those are even questionable themselves. I think they're bringing back COVID right now as well, like really hyping up CV-19 because they think it's going to hurt Trump. And meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi in Congress has completely blocked. The Republicans came up to, I think it's like $1.8 trillion, right? They were at 1 trillion, then 1.5, 1.6. They came up to 1.8, and Nancy Pelosi deaded them. Right? I don't even know what the Republicans are doing. They keep giving in to Democrats, and Democrats want like $5 trillion, or at least Nancy Pelosi does. But I was watching a Kyle Kulinski, maybe I think is how you pronounce it, from Secular Talk. I was watching one of those videos, and even Democrats realize how bad Nancy Pelosi is, right? How narcissistic she is, how psychopathic she is, and how politically driven she is. Like, this is a political agenda. She doesn't care about the American people. Picture this, right? Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco, where, the average of income is like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she has like $120 million to her name or her family's name. The highest incomes, highest housing prices, highest prices for everything. Really, think about how out of touch somebody like that, who represents that. And I'm not saying anything bad about people in San Francisco, but it's a different, there's an elitism there, right? An elitism from Nancy Pelosi that is completely, just totally unrelatable from the rest of America, from the heartland, right? From other states and smaller states, smaller populations. Nancy Pelosi is just completely out of touch because the people she represents, right, is a very small I mean, maybe not population wise, but, geographically and culturally, it's a very kind of like small enclave. It doesn't represent America. She believes, right? I do think she wants to believe that she represents Americans. She tells this to Wolf Blitzer, right? Remember, Wolf Blitzer, I actually kind of called her out a little bit. She called Wolf Blitzer a Trump apologist, but you can really see the elitism coming from her when she does these things. And so when I was reading through the comments on these Democrat channels, these pro-Biden channels, a lot of them were really talking about how, you could see it. The sentiment is there that Nancy Pelosi's no good. A lot of people hope she gets, I forget who the guy is, but, gets kicked out of there, that somebody else is elected, her incumbent. And they can see the elitism, right? They realize that this is political. Nancy Pelosi only cares about hurting Trump, even if she's hurting the American people. If she thinks she's hurting Trump, that's the price to pay, right? That's just the price she's willing to pay. I mean, it's the same thing with all of these Democrats, really. But all this, the COVID numbers, of course, they're going to rise right before the election. I wouldn't be surprised if the riots start breaking out soon because, especially in New York, right? New York, LA, things are really, really tense. And you've got the Hasidic Jews, you've got Black Lives Matter, you've got Antifa. You do have right-wing coalitions and, a lot of, maybe right-wing groups where the Fed is going to be there trying to drag them, undercover, going to try to be dragging them into this sort of, I don't want to call it a civil war, but, these battles and skirmishes that we see all over the streets. I think things are really going to ramp up, right? Be prepared to see some crazy shit because this election is the election in 2020, right? It would make sense that this year is going to end with a big shebang. Maybe I'm wrong, but I will not be surprised if this year ends with a big shebang. There are mass rioting, supposedly, rising COVID numbers, hundreds of thousands of people dying, according to the media. Just constant 24/7 anti-Trump hate. But speaking of anti-Trump hate and the president, there's the other side of this. And this is where we're going to get into the topic of propaganda. There's the other side of this. And there are huge portions of the population that can't even imagine that Trump is maybe a master deceiver, right? That can't even wrap their minds around the possibility that Trump does have his own special interests and, he's going to serve their needs way before he serves the needs of the American people. That thought is inconceivable to a lot of people, to huge populations, on the right, politically speaking. And you really see this on YouTube because, you do have people that are on the left, 100% against Trump, right? But then you have people on the right that effectively, like, he's their cult leader, right? Well, you have the COVIDians led by, I don't know, maybe Kamala Harris, face-wise, but really the Clintons and Soros are back behind a lot of that. But then you have this other side, and, these are the, people call them the Q-tards, right? The MAGA nuts. And it's not that, MAGA is not a good message, but I think that message, that spirit, it's bigger than Trump, right? And people associate it with Trump. Like Trump is the god of make America great again, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but it's almost become like a quasi agent, not agency, but organization, maybe an agency, because a lot of the times when you try to confront this super pro, like Trump can do no wrong, ideology that's out there, you'll get death threats. You'll get, you see it all the time. These people are probably trolling, but you never know. There could be agents, government agents that are in these communities that are sort of directing these narratives. I mean, the whole Q psyop, right? I do believe that was a military operation, probably the U.S. Military, but if not, there's other culprits, but the point is that the propaganda is everywhere. Trump is definitely engaged in propaganda, 100%, right? 100%. And, the fact that he's the president, and that he's in DC, right? That they let him into DC. There's no way he's not involved in propaganda to some extent. And then you see people online, and sometimes, you know, they get accused of being paid propagandists either for Trump or against Trump. And so there's Q channels, you know, you see them under Roy Potter's videos, and they make videos about Roy Potter, and they really don't like what he's saying, because Roy Potter, this Mormon sort of, I think ex-Mormon, ex-polygamist guy in Salt Lake City, Utah, I think is where he's at. You know, his streams, I think they're interesting, right? But he's a little bit of a nut, right? He's kind of nutty. He comes off kind of a little over passionate about this. So people think that people, especially people that follow Q and, you know, the Q MAGA fans and stuff, they think that this guy Roy is a paid propagandist to hurt Trump, right? A paid propagandist and you know, a paid disinformation agent. And maybe he is, right? I'm not going to say that that's not a possibility. But what these Q people say is that it's not a possibility that Trump is involved in this level of propaganda and, you know, disinformation himself, right? I've made, or I put the idea out there that, you know, it's the people who are doing commentary, right? They are on board with everything Trump does, right? Like Trump is what I think it's King Solomon. Anything he touches turns to gold. They just see Trump as a godlike figure. Like, this is really he's the godhead of their, you know, where we go one, what is it? Where one goes, we all go, or something like that. Remember when that tweet when I think he was talking about Fauci, and he was like, Trump tweeted, Fauci is with us always and he's with us all the time and in all ways, or something like that. Just very strange cult, like, you know, almost like biblical language. Somebody like Roy Potter could be a disinformation agent, but somebody like Styx Hexenhammer, right? I'm not accusing him, but that's the kind of person the CIA would hire to, or maybe Trump's Trump sort of faction, the wings of the CIA that Trump is able to control. You know, this is how it's done. It's been done like this for a very, very long time. Propaganda is nothing new either. It's not just because we live in the video age that everybody is pushing propaganda. But there's propaganda everywhere. So, you know, to call one person, right, like Roy Potter, right, and you can say what you want to say about him. You can say he's a Mormon, he's not a real Christian. You can call him a Satanist. You can call him a polygamist. I mean, there's a lot of things that I guess you could criticize somebody like Roy Potter on. But, you know, to get so hung up on one particular individual being a disinformation agent, or maybe perhaps, you know, he's also in the military, which is, in this scenario, kind of suspect. But I mean, there's a lot of people that you could say that about, right? It's not that I think somebody like Baked Alaska is a CIA agent, but I just feel like that's what the CIA does, right? The reason I use these people as an example, Alex Jones, right? A lot of people think Alex Jones is, you know, 100% compromised, and he's just misleading Americans left and right. You know, people really believe this stuff. But I mean, this is everywhere, right? This is everywhere. These are the people in the media. These are the people that are in the alternative media, or at least they're posing like they're alternative media. This is everywhere. Propaganda is all over YouTube. You see it in every advertisement, right? You see leftist propaganda, Trump's advertisements. A lot of those, you know, that would qualify as propaganda. His you know, he has a very like patriotic flavor to his videos. He has a very, you know, the military thing. But it's like, is Trump really that guy? We know Trump was a Democrat for like 40 years in New York, right? We know he was building skyscrapers and into real estate in the leftist hellhole that is New York. We know he was friends with Epstein, right? There's a lot of things about Trump that I think are not represented in his media, right? But that's because they're trying to spread this image, this patriotic image, this sort of Reagan-esque image. So it's a lot of drama, right? The Q people going after Roy Potter and Roy Potter calling out, these Q YouTubers. But I think the main takeaway is that propaganda is all over YouTube. You're not really going to experience YouTube if you're watching political content. You just can't experience YouTube without being bombarded with all kinds of propaganda, right? And like I said, technically everything is propaganda. If somebody has a political ideology or a religious ideology, it's propaganda, because all of us, we have our own opinions, right? We infer certain things, we insinuate. The mainstream media does this as well. Nothing is straight facts. How can it be? We're all telling a story. So none of this is like straight facts without opinions, without slant. Everybody has a slant. Everybody's got a spin. But it's like some people don't realize this. That's the dangerous thing, is there's a lot of people out there that don't realize this, right? Or they just can't tolerate or handle people that think differently than them, right? I do think, to get conspiratorial here, I do think the CIA is all over YouTube. So just be careful about that. Look out for that. And, try to really see what you're watching, and ask God to help you see it, because that's what I do. And I think God wants us to see this stuff. I think God does want all of us to see through lies, because at the end of the day, there is only one truth. And, well, I'm just not sure we get it from Trump all the time. But this guy, Rabbi, what did I say his name was? Rabbi Handler. This guy is the truth, right? He is telling the truth. New York, just like Cali, is on fire, maybe in a different way, but is on fire. And New York's in a lot of trouble. And Trump does need to respond to this. Trump needs to do something. We got to intervene. We intervene in foreign countries all the time. We intervene overseas, in Iraq and Afghanistan, on the behalf of other countries, might I add, right? Well, Trump has to intervene somehow. Maybe he can't do it right before the election. But watch this video, and also check out that Nancy Pelosi clip with Wolf Blitzer. I tell you, that is definitely worth a watch. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Let me know about propaganda that you've spotted. How do you think? What are some ways that you try to look for the misinformation? What have you noticed? Right? We got to share that kind of intelligence. And let me know what you think about the Rabbi video. Do you think Trump is going to intervene and help them out? Follow me on social media. We're all over the web. Big shout out to my patrons. And I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your evening. This is CMC Broadcasting. I'll see you next time. God bless.